Good day, everybody. Welcome to Rocky Mountain Readings, where this week we've been reading the beautiful book, Everyday Holiness, The Jewish Spiritual Path of Mussar. Just a profound book, really going in depth, showing us by experience how to walk everyday holiness. And what I really liked about yesterday's message was his definition of true humility, how it's all about allotting the space that one takes up. And he states the right amount of space is also situational. He says proper humility means having the right relationship to self, giving self neither too big nor too small a role in your life. And we've seen this in the reverse, especially for those that have come out of Christianity. They're taught that any space for self is too much, and therefore they are trained to give no space for self, and they feel defeated and they feel little and small. The reality is, to be truly humble, you've got to give yourself the space to be you, to grow, to flourish. In other words, a plant needs the sunlight in order to grow, for sure. So, I found his definitions clear and beautiful, and we hope that you folks are enjoying this as well. We had a low turnout yesterday, so, really got me scratching my head thinking, what am I doing? But, we're going to persist, and today's starting off with patience, and that's probably what I need, called savlanut in Hebrew. Let's start from here, and we hope that you're blessed and you find something useful to integrate into your life. Whatever may obstruct me from reaching my goals, it is possible to bear the burden of the situation. Woe to the pampered one who has never been trained to be patient. Either today or in the future, he is destined to sip from the cup of affliction. Whoa! That's from Rabbi M. Leffen, from his book Hespon Hanefesh. Not a day goes by when we don't face some sort of frustrating delay or obstacle, and too often our response is to strain against how things are. That tends to happen to me when I'm rushing somewhere in my car, but those feelings may suddenly sneak up on you while the water fills the tub ever so slowly, or as your child struggles with clumsy fingers to master the complexity of a shoelace, or on those days when nothing, not your internet server, not your spouse, not the postman, nobody does things when or how you want. Impatience seldom makes things happen faster or better, and usually only causes us grief. Think about it. Impatience only causes us grief. It's like an inner blaze that burns up without giving off any warmth. Wow, that would be bad enough, but it is also a short step from impatience to rage. Think about it. And we all know what harm can come to ourselves and others because of uncontrollable anger. I'll be remiss not to point out right at the outset that there are circumstances where we should not be patient and where patience is not a virtue. When confronted with injustice or the needs or suffering of another person or other situations where our actions could make a difference, we have no business patiently taking our time. Patience becomes into play when it is our own burden we are bearing, or when there really is no course of action available to us at the moment to alleviate the situation. Walking in God's patient way. Who wouldn't be delighted to deepen their ability to meet life's challenges with more patience? We get very clear support for doing so from the Bible, where it tells us that we should walk in his ways. This simple but forceful idea, sometimes called imitatio Dei, emulating God, is the ultimate blueprint for the spiritual life, and tells us that we should model our lives on godly virtues. That's how we move ourselves closer to the highest potential we have from birth. And when we act with heavenly virtue in our personal lives, we help make the world a little more like heaven. In practical terms, we emulate Hashem by practicing virtue, or, as I like to call it, living in virtuous reality. The sages tell us, As Hashem is called merciful and gracious, so be you merciful and gracious. As Hashem is called righteous, so be you righteous. As Hashem is called holy, so be you holy. As Hashem is forgiving, so too should we strive to be forgiving. We are guided to emulate Hashem in all the divine attributes of mercy and righteousness, though not the attributes of severity and justice that we can also find in the Torah, because we want the world to be infused with qualities of goodness. We have, Shalom, Sheila and Ashley G, welcome. You inspire me to keep going. Thank you. So nice to see you, ladies. All right. Because we want the world to be infused with qualities of goodness, we have a responsibility to become vessels for those same virtues. That prescription includes the trait of patience. No matter how you may conceive of Hashem or the creative force that stands behind the universe, there is no doubt that this ultimate source of life is endowed with patience, especially when compared to us. Think of the pace of earthly eras, creeping along as slowly as glaciers advancing and retreating in an ice age. Stars and galaxies are born, mature, and pass away. And as for us, what the Mussar tradition offers as evidence for Hashem's patience is the fact that our lives are sustained even when we do wrong. It's not hard to imagine a universe where there is absolutely no margin for error, where punishment is instantaneous and total, but that isn't the world we live in. Hashem is patient and preserves our lives even when our actions happen to hit way off the mark, to give us time to come to deeper realizations, make amends, and return to a straighter way. From this, man should learn to what extent he, too, should be patient and bear the yoke of his fellow. Since Hashem is patient, then we, who are encouraged to guide our lives by walking in his ways, should also be patient. Suffering impatience. Where we get into trouble with impatience is in our reactivity. The problem confronting you may be entirely real. You're late, you need it now, there will be consequences. But whatever the problem, no matter how great or how small, it is one thing to face those life issues just as they are, and quite another to slop grief, worry, regret, impatience, and other such mental condiments all over the situation. Whoa, what a way to put it, eh? Slop like condiments, right? Grief, worry, regret, and impatience. Yeah, just like on a hot dog, eh? Yeah. Reactions like these only increase our burden by adding a whole extra dimension of inner suffering and often hurtful behavior to an already difficult experience. Can you identify situations that tend to try your patience? Oh, yeah. In the chapter on patience in the classic Mussar text, Hespon Hanefesh by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Leffen, the author sets up his discussion by pointing out that there are many cases of people extracting delight from what we'd agree are painful and unsavory experiences. By way of illustration, he mentions the experience of tasting vinegar and pepper, which are sour and sharp, but which can add zest and flavor to food when used in the right way, and be a delight to the palate. But towering above all these are the spiritual delights in which the supernal soul, the neshama, exalts. For example, the wondrous, sublime pleasure of acting righteously with everyone. He is pointing to something that we all have experienced because it is innate within us, which is the deep and satisfying pleasure we get from doing good, especially with other people. Continuing to work toward his consideration of patience, he points out that in many situations, we can do right by planning and careful action. But for those serious incidents which come upon us unavoidably and which we were powerless to prepare for, or which we could not deal with once they transpired, Hashem has provided us with a remedy regimen, patience. Patience is here depicted as a tool we can call on to help us endure when we find ourselves in difficult circumstances we did not choose and could not avoid. In this, he is revealing something essential about patience, as this attribute is understood in the Jewish tradition. The Hebrew word for patience is savlunut, which can also mean tolerance. The same root gives rise to the words that mean suffer and endure, and also the noun for a porter who carries goods. We can learn something fundamental from this pool of words that derive from the common source. Patience means enduring and tolerating, and the experience may even bring us elements of suffering. Well said. We get a hint of the same message in the English word suffer, which means both to experience pain and to tolerate or put up with. So patience is not just about waiting, it's about bearing. A story told by a Mussar student reflects on this core aspect of patience. She had been in a car accident that caused her back problems, and that in turn had an impact on her ability to work. I think about all the patience I have had to get to this point. Patience with my back and physical limitations. Patience with the legal process. Patience with my attorney, who wasn't always available exactly when I had a question or a need. She realized that the root of her problem with being patient was accepting what I cannot control. It is not that difficult to surrender and say to myself, I have done all I can. It is in the hands of God. And there's something, we need to learn to say more often. I've done all I can. It's in the hands of God. What is so much more difficult is to be at peace about it and to really let go. I find that tolerating the uncertainty of the outcome and accepting the burden of an outcome that is unwanted are both hard. Here is the bearing that is essential to patience. You get it? The converse is that if you are the kind of person who finds it easy to be joyful in traffic jams and to whistle happily in mile-long bank lines, then you have little need for patience. You're already well equipped with tranquility and equanimity, and so you are not that reactive to the delays and obstacles that tend to send most people spinning into a rage. Patience comes into play when you are already ticked off, when the situation already has you starting to fume. It's then that you reach into your pocket and pull out your patience, which helps you to bear the burden that is pressing on you. Think of it like something that strengthens, reinforcement. Opening the space between the match and the fuse. The problem with impatience is that it usually takes only a split second for its first glowing embers to ignite into flames that course through us, even before we become aware that they have started up. Impatience snuffs out consciousness, and before I even know it's happening, I'm leaning on my horn, or you're going hoarse, yelling at your child, or cursing the postman. At this point, we don't even recognize ourselves, and there is little to be done but try to rein in these feelings enough to minimize any damage we might do. It's so much better to be able to catch our impatience as it's arising and nip it in the bud. To do this, we need to recognize the fact that we are getting impatient and then take responsibility for our impatience. This is much easier said than done. For example, it is common that when a couple is getting ready to go out for a pleasant evening, one of them is always ready before the other. It's always going to happen, right? Somebody's going to be ready before the other. The sad thing is it's always one person that's always last, right? Getting ready. And it's always the same one who is ready first and waiting at the door while the other one has to make one more phone call or change shoes or tie or dress one last time or check on something or other. Time passes, impatience grows, and by the time they are both in the car heading out for the evening or to visit friends, they are not even speaking to each other. The tendency is for one who is always ready first to become righteous and blame the other for bad behavior. While it surely isn't good to be unpunctual and to waste other people's time, what the impatient person tends to be blind to is that he or she has the personal freedom to choose to call on the power of patience in that moment in order to bear the situation without smoldering and then igniting and acting out. When you find yourself in a situation that is triggering your impatience, Instead of giving all your attention and energy to finding fault with the person who is so clearly at fault, you can choose to be patient and take responsibility for your emotional response to that situation. You make the choice of whether you buckle or call on patience to help you bear the burden of the situation. My teacher, Rabbi Per, calls this awareness an exercise of choice, opening the space between the match and the fuse. Witnessing and naming. Being able to call on patience in the way I am describing depends on having cultivated your awareness of the telltale signs of impatience, so you can spot them right in the instance that they begin to stir. The practice is to witness and name the feelings just as they come up, which requires that you say to yourself, I'm feeling impatient, or there's impatience. Make note of it. Just by forming those words, you are holding open at least a tiny crack through which the light of consciousness can still shine. And if you can do that, then at that point, what is going to happen to that impatience is suddenly no longer so certain. There are obstacles to the sort of awareness I am noting here. One is the common condition of simply being disconnected from one's own feelings. Too often, people who are impatient and act it are unaware of their own behavior. When the inner lights are dimmed like that, spiritual progress is stopped in its tracks. Another equally common obstacle is denial. In this case, people actually do know their patterns, but refuse to acknowledge and take responsibility for them. Rather, they deflect what is real and could be painful and difficult, and instead cling to false analysis and excuses. I've seen abusive relationships happen when one just goes too far with demanding the patience of the other, and they don't realize the harm that they're inflicting. They're forcing the burden on another, and they deny that they're even doing it. Truth and consciousness are predictions to exercising free will. Only when the light of awareness is glowing brightly can we see the truth and choose to follow a course that is guided by our values and goals, not by our animal soul, instincts, emotions, reactions, and habits. And the brighter awareness glows, the more freedom of choice we actually have. Many techniques work to increase the strength of conscious awareness to open that space between the match and the fuse. Meditation does this, and it is also one of the main outcomes of the accounting of this soul, practice that is described in part 3 of this book. The challenging thing is, you have to commit yourself to doing these sorts of practices at those times when awareness is not being tested, so their effects will be right at hand when it is. This tests your discipline. If you suddenly found yourself having to climb up many flights of stairs, you'd be very glad that you had kept up your physical conditioning before it was called on. If you were a gunfighter in the Wild West, you'd work on your draw before you needed it for a shootout. The same is true for the inner life. As my first meditation teacher repeatedly said, do spiritual practice now so you'll have it when you need it. Patience and humility. The situations in which we can feel impatience are numberless, but there is one common factor that unites them all. We only burn with that particular fire when the focus in the situation is on me. You are delaying me, misleading me, berating me. You are interfering with my plans or standing in the way of my needs. Sometimes the only inner voice I can hear is my ego, loudly promoting all its important needs and plans and drowning out any other voice that might whisper within. We all tend to see ourselves as the prime actor in a drama that swirls around us. Some of us believe that all that heavy action is playing out according to a script we ourselves have written. Others see it the opposite way, playing the victim to the forces that press in on their own little stronghold. Despite the obvious differences, both these attitudes see the whole of life as pivoting around a separate identity that stands at the center of a very personal universe. But the truth is different. We are neither so central nor independent as all that. We are actually wired into all kinds of larger circuits and systems, from the molecular to the social, and we don't control many of the factors that have a role in shaping our lives. Least of all, we can expect to rule the timetable according to which life takes place. The Mussar teachers encourage us to contemplate these truths, because when we realize a deeper understanding of our rightful place in the universe, this helps us avoid getting all worked up when things don't go just precisely as we'd like. Why should everything go our way, considering how small we are and how many other agendas and needs are always involved? Why should everything go our way? Yeah, it's a good question, especially if somebody's being terribly impatient. When we do hold in sight how integrated we are within the grand schemes that make up and sustain the world, we see ourselves situated amid the large wheels turning and rivers flowing, moved by hands that are not our own. Whatever pleasure or pain we may experience, our lives are taking place within great cycles of time, space, and material, even though we often have our eyes focused so directly in front of our noses that we don't perceive the truth of that largest picture. Yeah, that's the largest picture is where the sovereignty of God is viewed and divine providence is walked in. We truthfully have so little control over so many features of our lives that it doesn't make any sense at all to put ourselves through useless suffering as if we did have control, and that just what we do when we slip into impatience. That's just what we do. It's important to sort out what is actually within our power and what is not. Very important. And the remarkable thing is that in both cases, we are better off to be patient with the things that are within our control to change, and patient with those that aren't. The fruits of patience. Patience doesn't mean that we become passive. We still need to make a genuine effort to set the pace and trajectory of our lives, but we don't need to react to every delay or deflection as if it were a denial, whether that means a denial of ourselves or a denial by Hashem. In those moments when I am good at being patient, I live in the here and the now without straining against reality. I walk a middle path, not leaning to one extreme of being inactive and fatalistic, because that way I negate the powers I do have. Limited though they might be, nor veering to the other where impatience reigns. There is a story in the Talmud about Rav Preda, who had a student who was so slow that he could not grasp a lesson unless his teacher taught it to him 400 times. One day, while Rav Preda was teaching the student, someone came and told the rabbi that he needed his services when he had finished teaching. That day, after he had completed the 400th repetition, Rav Preda asked the student if he had grasped the lesson, to which the student replied that he had not. Why is it different today than other days? The teacher asked, and his student answered that from the moment the other person had come to speak to Rav Preda, the student had been distracted, thinking to himself, soon the master will have to get up. Soon the master will have to get up. Rav Preda then replied, if that is so, let me teach you the lesson again. He then repeated the teaching an additional 400 times. Wow. Gratitude, or Hakarat Hatov, awakening to the good and give thanks. Ben Zoma used to say, a good guest says how much my host toiled for me. He put so much meat in front of me, so much wine, so much bread. All his exertion was just for me. A bad guest says, what did my host toil for me? I ate just one roll, just one piece of meat. I drank just one cup. All his exertion was for his own household. That's from the Babylonian Talmud. Think about it, though. The Hebrew term for gratitude is Hakarat Hatov, which literally means recognizing the good. The good is already there. Practicing gratitude means being fully aware of the good that is already yours. Wow, very important. If you've lost your job, you still have your family and health. You have something to be grateful for. If you can't move around except in a wheelchair, your mind is as sharp as ever. You have something to be grateful for. If your house burns down, but you still have your memories, you have something to be grateful for. If you've broken a string on your violin and you still have 3 more, you have something to be grateful for. What is good in your life? When you open yourself to experience the trait of gratitude, you discover with clarity and accuracy how much good there is in your life. Whatever you are lacking will still be missing, of course. And in reaching for gratitude, no one is saying you ought to put those rose-colored glasses to obscure the shortcomings. The obstacles to appreciating the good can also be very real, especially when life is riven by suffering. But it is worth the effort to practice gratitude, especially since the one who benefits most is the one who is suffering. Recognizing the good affirms life and more, because when you see the good in the world, it sets your heart free to soar, to shout, and to sing a song of life. Important. Most of us tend to focus so heavily on the deficiencies in our lives that we barely perceive the good that counterbalances them. This tendency is bolstered by advertisers who attempt to convince us of just how inadequate and lacking we really are, in the hope we will try to plug our wants and needs by buying some product or another. There is no limit to what we don't have. Keep that in mind. This is a huge statement. There's no limit to what we don't have. And it will always be the case. So understand that such is so. It can help you be grateful. And if that is where we focus, then our lives are inevitably filled with endless dissatisfaction. It is also true that even if we are aware of our gifts, we tend to grow callous to those fine things that pepper our lives, so that after a while we no longer even see that they are there. How long do you need to be grateful before seeing change in real life? Oh, Cookie Monster, don't be thinking about giving up gratitude. Gratitude has instant reward in the sense of beginning to heal the heart. If you're truly and mentally grateful, okay, thankful, that joy, it's what changes the heart attitude to joy. And suffering is where the heart is so filled with pain that it begins to affect the body in a negative way. And when you understand how things filter down, gratitude has to do with thought. Think on those things that you do, in fact, have that might be lacking other places, especially like in this day and age. How many people are being dislocated from their homes in Ukraine? You're not in that situation. Thank God, and give him glory and be grateful you have the littlest things. And when you can be thankful for the littlest things, it should have instant change in your feelings on the matter. But then again, too, don't let your emotions deny or drive your life, because you're just putting yourself on the roller coaster. Okay, you need to have your mind, your heart, and your actions all in alignment, in the sense that they're flowing and functioning properly. You remove any one of them, and you're in real hurt for sure. But gratitude starts here, and it affects here instantly, and that begins to affect your actions and the way you treat people and the way they're going to treat you, for sure. It is also true that even if we are aware of our gifts, we tend to grow callous of those fine things that pepper our lives. Yeah, don't ever take things for granted. When you have so much, sometimes we tend to, they say familiarity breeds contempt. Yeah, so after a while we no longer even see that they are there. These are the things you need to really refocus on and say, no, I'm thankful I've got this, that, and the other thing. We come to take the good for granted. Don't do that. When gratitude is a living reality well established in our hearts, however, we constantly refresh our vision so that we make accurate note of the good that surrounds us. Think about the good that surrounds you. This is the ethos that lies behind the ancient proverb, which asks, who is rich? And in the answer, he who rejoices in his own lot. That's from the book of Proverbs, I'm sure. If you're happy with your own lot, that's what makes you rich or defines wealth. Live like that, and you will suddenly discover that you want to give thanks for anything or anyone who has benefited you, whether they meant it or not. Imagine a prayer of thanks springing to your lips when the driver in the next car lets you merge without protest, or when there is electricity to light your room, I'm sure, or the food is adequate. Giving thanks can become a flow that waters the fields of life. Wow, that's a good statement, isn't it? Giving thanks can become a flow that waters the fields of life. When gratitude is well established and flowing, it is a sign of a heart that has been made right and whole. Gratitude can't coexist with arrogance, though. Resentment and selfishness. So gratitude cannot coexist with arrogance, resentment, and selfishness. So if you find your life with no gratitude, these are three things you can work on. Okay, keep that in mind, Cookie. The Hasidic teacher, Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, writes, gratitude rejoices with her sister joy and is always ready to light a candle and have a party. Gratitude doesn't much like the old cronies of boredom, despair, and taking life for granted. And that's probably in the Garden of Emunah, or he also had, I think, a book called In the Garden of Gratitude. Grateful to whom or what? To what and whom should we be thankful? Feel thankful. In the Torah, when Moses is bringing down the plagues on Egypt, it isn't he who initiated turning the Nile River into blood and bringing frogs from the river. His brother Aaron invokes those plagues. The medieval commentator Rashi explains that the river had protected Moses when he was an infant, and therefore he could not send a plague against it. Hashem was teaching Moses a powerful lesson in gratitude. We can open in gratitude even to inanimate objects. Whenever Rebbe Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, the Kotzker Rebbe, would replace a worn-out pair of shoes, he would neatly wrap up the old ones in newspaper before placing them in the trash, and he would declare, how can I simply toss away such a fine pair of shoes that have served me so well these past years? I felt the same way when I gave away my old Honda that had ferried me and my family so reliably for 18 years. Wow. There is a story about the Mussar teacher, Rabbi Eliyahu Lopian, who was talking to a student after prayers and at the same time was folding up his talit, his prayer shawl. The talit was large, and he had to rest it on a bench to fold it. After he had finished the folding, Reb Elia noticed that the bench was dusty, and so he headed out to fetch a towel in order to clean the bench. The student to whom he was speaking realized that Reb Elia was what he was doing and ran to get the towel for him. Reb Elia held up his hand. No, I must clean it myself, for I must show my gratitude to the bench upon which I folded my talis. So see how he just found something to be grateful for. Now, if we learn from these stories that we can be grateful to rivers, shoes, cars, and benches, which help us involuntarily, how much more so to human beings who have free will and who help us consciously out of the goodness of their hearts, or to the mysterious source out of which our lives have come. When Leah, wife of the patriarch Jacob, had her fourth child, she named him Yehuda or Judah, which means I am grateful. The name Jude derives from Yehudi, the people of Yehuda, revealing that gratitude is intrinsic to being Jewish. This idea is confirmed in the prayer book, where so many of the prayers express gratitude to Hashem for all we have. Astoundingly, the prayer to Hashem, who is good and does good, which is part of the blessing after eating, was introduced directly after the defeat of the Bar Kokhba revolt and the fall of the fortress of Batar, where thousands of people were slain by the legions of Rome. When the remains of the martyrs of Batar finally received proper burial, the sages ordained the recitation of this blessing for the goodness of God, as they found the goodness even within, maybe especially within, a catastrophe. This is their lesson to us. In our lives, the Torah asks us to recite blessings for everything, from the most mundane activities like eating to the most extraordinary like seeing a rainbow or the ocean, all of which help us focus on and appreciate that which we might otherwise take for granted. This is a very, very key, Cookie. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that we can be grateful for that we otherwise might take for granted if we just pay attention, begin to let the mind look for, think, and then, wait, let tiny little thing, like I'm thankful for doing these readings when you folks show up. It means I'm reaching somebody, and when you ask a question to me, it's like, oh, thank Hashem, somebody's actually looking for an answer that the writer actually has written about. To me, it says, oh, thank you, Hashem, I've picked something that might be effective. Nobody wants to do anything in vain and or have their life express vanity in any way. Gratitude is a big key to that for sure. Leah was thankful to God for the gift of another son, and her daily blessing focuses on God's bounty as well. The fact is, and you got to think, there's a word, bounty. Bounty, huge abundance. You got to start looking at the world with as abundant gift from Hashem. The fact is, however, that many people find it easier to thank Hashem than to acknowledge the gifts received from other people. People are complex, and they give in such confounding ways. Sometimes when they give correction, it's rude. Yeah. This can make it so much harder to feel grateful for their gifts or to thank them. But we need to be ready to give thanks to a fellow human being, even if he or she has not done anything special for us. Why? Because the sole trait of gratitude holds the key to opening the heart. It is an elevated soul trait and a fine orientation to the inanimate, human, and divine dimension of the world. The refined soul is a grateful soul. This is, very important. A refined soul is a grateful soul. Gratitude, though, doesn't come easy. Yep, sometimes you can be at this for decades and, still so much more room to grow. Yet gratitude, and this is like I've said before, there's an infinite room to grow when you think of Hashem, because Hashem is infinite, and you got to be thankful for that infiniteness. Yeah. Yet gratitude often doesn't come easily to us, and it usually takes some effort to develop this quality through practice. When we practice gratitude, we make an effort to heighten our awareness of the gifts we already possess, and so relieve ourselves of the exhausting pursuit of the ever-receding targets of those things we think we lack. Wow. Ever-receding, you can't look at, the world just will throw endless wants at you, and you'll feel a sense of lack. But the reality is you need to focus on the things that we do have to have gratitude. No wonder gratitude satisfies the soul. So that makes your question even more important. It frees us from compulsive grasping, and so gives us back our lives. In the Mussar Classic Duties of the Heart, Rabbi Bakia ibn Pakuda tells us that there isn't a person alive who hasn't been given gifts, if only the gift of life and hope, but we tend to suffer a kind of blindness that keeps us from seeing and appreciating what we have. He identifies 3 reasons why we fail to see the abundance in our lives for which we ought to be grateful. And it's worth paying attention to what he says because his insights are as true for us today as they were nearly 1,000 years ago when he wrote them. As you read these points, see if you can identify how these factors play out in your own life and keep you from the gratitude that is the soul's satisfaction. First, he says we tend not to feel appreciative because we are too absorbed in worldly things and in the enjoyment of them. He points out that physical pleasures can never be fully gratified, and so we pursue them endlessly, which keep us from gratitude for what we have. Second, we are so used to our gifts that we don't even really see them anymore. We have grown so accustomed to them that they appear to us as typical, permanent, unremarkable features of our lives. But we just take them for granted. We don't see all the good that is in our lives for which we really could and should be grateful. And third, we are so focused on the travails and afflictions we suffer in this world that we forget that both our very being and all we owe are among the good things that have been gifted to us. The result of this foolishness, Rabbi Pakuda concludes, is that many good things are left unenjoyed, and the happiness to be had from them becomes tainted, either because people do not recognize the good in it or they do not realize its value. Yeah. So if you want to be valued yourself, you need to become a person of gratitude. Starts to, put you on that journey to being valued yourself. If you show if you take everything for granted, the inevitable end is you're going to feel less valued. This voice from a millennium ago is saying things that seem to be equally applicable to our lives today. Isn't he pointing to the common feelings of entitlement that keep many of us from recognizing the good and being grateful? We are experts in wanting and complaining. And even if the problems are real, things aren't perfect, we don't give due appreciation to what we already have in hand. Yes, the glass is certainly half empty, but it is also half full. Someone once challenged me, what could a prisoner in a concentration camp be grateful for? Being alive, I answered. Yeah, we've read a couple of books that were, like last week we read Say Yes to Life, and you could see through Finkel's life, for sure. Even for the challenges, you can give thanks for the challenges. Oh, as hard as they, they seem to come like waves, endless waves of the ocean, just beating and battering down on us. But are you thankful for them? That's usually when, I think I said it once before, is, when the trials of life become like a lukewarm bath. If you've ever gotten into a really hot bathtub and it starts to burn the skin, you feel, but you start to settle in, and you become accustomed to it. If your life has had enough of those challenges and it becomes like a lukewarm bath and you're thankful for such, boy, oh boy, it just changes the outlook for sure. Even for the challenges. The poem Thanks by W.S. Merwin includes the lines, back from a series of hospital, back from a mugging. After funerals, we are saying thank you. After the news of the dead, whether or not we knew them, we are saying thank you. In a culture up to its chin in shame, living in the stench it has chosen, we are saying thank you. And it goes on to describe all sorts of other contemporary issues, and still the chorus resounds, we are saying thank you. How can that be? Why on earth would anyone want to say thank you for the police at the back door, the beatings, the crooks, the animals dying around us, the forests falling faster than the minutes? Merwin is challenging us to stretch to the very radical kind of gratitude. What he is proposing won't be easy or natural for us because he is throwing open the simple certainties of good and bad, through which we tend to see the world. But how useful, and you got to think, that goes the other way. How many people are, over embellishing the bad and denying the good, right? Some people could over embellish the good, but yeah. But how useful and even true are these categories? We cheer for the good that happens to us and mourn for the bad. But are we really in a position to pass such clear judgment as to which is which? Sometimes the impediments of life, you're driving down the road and you get slowed down, and then you realize that just prevented you from being involved in a collision down the lane. And you got to give Hashem thanks for even being slowed down in your if you're impatient, you're rushing, you tend to be a potential hazard out there. Think about it. How certain can we be that something that happens to us is really for our good and something else bad? A story about the sage Rabbi Akiva says this perfectly. He used to say, a person should always make a habit of saying, whatever the all-merciful does, he does for the good. He backed this up with a story from his own experience. Once Rabbi Akiva was walking along the way accompanied by a rooster, a donkey, and a lamp. He came to a certain place and looked for room at the inn, but he was turned away. When that happened, he said, whatever the all-merciful does, he does for the good. So he went with his rooster, donkey, and lamp and spent the night in an open field. The wind came and put out the lamp. A weasel came and ate the rooster. A lion came and ate the donkey. He said, whatever the all-merciful does, he does for the good. On that very night, a marauding troop came to that town and took into captivity everyone in the town. Rabbi Akiva was spared. Had his rooster crowed, had the donkey brayed, had the light glowed, he would have been discovered. The message is clear. How can we evaluate what is happening right now when we don't know what will happen next? It's only against the contours of the bigger picture that we can grasp the meaning and direction of our present circumstances. And this is why Hashem said to Moses, you can only see my back parts. A lot of we don't see until only in hindsight we can only see. Of course, Cookie, express gratitude. Start to think on the things that you in fact do have. Do you have running water? That's something to be grateful for. I'm sure you live in a first world country. That's worth being grateful for. Think about it. Only then can we possibly know what is good and what is bad. And even then we can really be sure because events continue to unfold. Did I not tell you, Rabbi Akiva concluded, whatever the all-merciful does, he does for good. Blessings in disguise. In my own life, had it not been for the painful downturn in my own business fortunes that I wrote about in Climbing Jacob's Ladder, I never would have discovered Mussar, and I would not be writing these words today. As we continually try to make sense of our experiences, there is wisdom in receiving whatever comes our way, with an attitude of thankfulness. Well, life is filled with ups and downs. Sometimes, Cookie Monster, Hashem is trying to take you to an even higher place, okay? And you got to think, if you've overcome a trial, okay, and you're on a height, spiritual height, he wants to take you higher. And sometimes that means going through a valley before you can get to the next mountain, which is a height. And so sometimes you do this, okay? You do this up and down because the next mountain is taller. and the lessons and tests become even more strict. Um, the lessons become, more profound the higher you go, but so do the trials, and you need to see that sometimes the lows seem more and more the place you don't want to be, and we wish we could just jump from high point to high point, but that's not the way life is designed. To get to that high point, you've got to, learn something before you're actually there. And so we all want to get to the high point without having to go through the lows. And so you need to realize, okay, Hashem's taking me to a new place, and be thankful for that. So, yeah. Hope that makes, thanks. That makes some sense. Ashley G says, the lens we choose to view our life and circumstances through can change everything. For sure. Gratitude is definitely a wonderful attitude to have. And I shared this last week about A plus B divided by C equals D. Your attitude plus your behavior. Okay, so you got to have the right attitude and add it with your behavior. Divide it by character, C. A plus B divided by C equals your D, your dreams or destiny. And so you've got to put into practice your attitude and behavior. They work in tandem, and you divide it by your character. And sometimes, like a diamond is put under pressure, coal put under tremendous pressure, sometimes Hashem is defining your character in your own life, okay? And that pressure comes from outside, and you need to learn to recognize it and be grateful for the trials that come in life, because that's Hashem taking you to another place. And when he gets you to that elevated place, he can then use you in a different way. So, will gratitude make you move to a better home? It's a start. You can't go wrong with gratitude, Cookie. You cannot go wrong with it. If you're not satisfied with the place you're in, you can, give Hashem thanks for it and start contemplating, the stages and the steps that need to happen to change that situation. Like I said before, you either live with or deal with. Live with or deal with. And sometimes patience means living with and even carrying the burden, right? Or dealing with means having to work through the problem, which sometimes means saving, planning, seeking, and searching, and then the hassle of moving. So, yeah. All right. So as we continually try to make sense of our experiences, there is wisdom in receiving whatever comes our way with an attitude of thankfulness. This attitude reflects an advanced level of gratitude practice. The method here is to set ourselves to seeing that even in the troubles we face in this world, we can find good and something to be grateful for. Just because our limited human eyes don't permit us to perceive that the apparent disaster that has landed in our lap will turn out to be for the best, when we cultivate that very attitude, its truth begins to become visible to us. Yeah, bless you, Cookie. The Mishnah goes so far in this direction as to instruct that one is obligated to say a blessing for evil. Wow. Wow, and then he cites his source. One is obligated to say a blessing for evil even. Wow, there's a huge statement. The sage Rava explained that this teaching was given to indicate that one must accept evil with gladness. Ooh, hardest thing in life to do, And I remember going an extended period of time where it didn't matter how much love or kindness or good I tried to put out in the world, somebody was always souring it. Didn't matter. And just like the sweetest of dishes can sour the next day, so can the most loving action be distorted and twisted by the maladaptive. And learning to accept evil with gladness. Oh, what a test, because there's nothing more wicked in this world when somebody distorts your kindness and calls it wickedness. And Hashem knows what he's doing, and they get their they reap what they sow for sure. The rabbis challenged him, asking for examples of how this can be the case. The answer that comes back is that our limited vision doesn't permit us to know with any certainty what is good and what is bad, despite appearances. For instance, if a flood took one's land, eventually that will be a good thing because his land gets covered with sediment and becomes more fertile. Now, however, it is a bad thing, and in regard to a good thing, like, for instance, if one found something, it appears for the moment as a good thing, even though it will become disadvantage to him, because if the government hears about it, it will confiscate the object from him. From where we stand at this moment, we just can't know which is which. And so, yeah, we need to realize about judging situations as good or bad ever. I mean, it becomes, if you can see it clearly in Torah, that's a whole different matter. From where we stand at this moment, we just can't know which is which. And so we bless for the good and we bless for the apparently bad too. There's a famous individual in the Talmud named Nahum Ish Gamzu who personifies this attitude. He's a righteous person who comes to the last days of his life destitute, blind, without the use of his limbs, and beset with illness. And yet, as each of these devastating conditions descends on him, no matter what is happening to him, he always says of it, Gamzu Tova, and that is also for the good. One story involving Nahum Ish Gamzu took place when the Jews wanted to send a gift to the court of Caesar, and the pious Nahum was chosen to be the emissary. He set off with a chest filled with gems and pearls. Along the way, some people secretly made off with his jewels and refilled the chest with ordinary dirt. When he discovered the switch, Nahum's response was only to say, Gamzu Lutova, this too is for the good, and to carry on with his mission. Other equally disastrous events take place, and he responds in just the same way. How could that be? How could it be for the best to find yourself having just presented a gift of a bucket of dirt to an enraged Roman emperor? The answer is that at this point, the story isn't over. Enter the prophet Elijah in disguise. He reveals that the dirt in the chest actually has magic properties. Caesar is overjoyed and rewards Nahum by refilling the chest with jewels and sending him on his way with great honor. Gamzu Lutova, that too is for the best. Here is the practice. When something apparently good happens to you, you offer the blessing, and that is also for the good. And if something bad happens to you, and that is also for the good, on the last broadcast of this television show, when the comedian Jerry Lewis was being thrown off the air, he quoted the saying that Nahum Ish Gamzu referred to above, which Lewis had learned from his mother. Gamzu Latova, he said on camera, and that is also for the good. No doubt this is a difficult spiritual practice, but when done sincerely, it has powerful impact on your life. It's just for you, Cookie. Saying thank you. Though there is great spiritual value in seeking the good in everything that happens, we have to be careful not to set ourselves up to being too much of a Pollyanna. All we want is to affirm that in everything that happens, there is the possibility of good, if only we could perceive it. And while it may not be visible now, perhaps in time we'll see the bigger picture. And perhaps that bigger picture will include dimensions that are beyond this world and beyond our known experience. This is such a reality. Perhaps that bigger picture will include dimensions that are beyond this world and beyond our known experience. This is so huge when you think of Hashem. So much dimensions beyond this world, even the way we can think, beyond our known experience, that we can't even postulate the ways in which they affect things. As the Jewish tradition affirms repeatedly in telling us that the real recompense for our lives is not in this world, but in the world to come. We have a tendency to live our lives mired in the feelings of deprivation. There you go. No one has to look far to find someone who has more money or is taller, healthier, or luckier in love. Comparing ourselves like this can create bitterness in the soul as we poison ourselves with judgment, grasping, and self recrimination. Wow. Cultivating gratitude counterbalances this tendency. When we take on the curriculum of reminding ourselves to be grateful, we change the perception of our lives. There you go, Ashley. It's just exactly how he states it, just like you did. And with that, we actually change our lives also. In undertaking to practice gratitude, it is important to call thankfulness to mind and then to express and act on the feeling of gratefulness we have fostered. This is just what I found myself doing one week when I was working on the soul trait of gratitude. During that very week, I got an email from a student who was very unhappy because of all the things she saw to be wrong with the Mussar course she was taking. As far as I could tell, the problems were on her end, like the fact that she had an old computer that didn't like attachments and that she seemed to be so overwrought that she was blaming instead of problem solving. Yeah, blaming instead of problem solving. Whoa. This is why I say live with or deal with. Are you blaming or are you problem solving? Taking the whole situation into account, I offered her a partial refund on her course fee. That seemed fair to me, but obviously not to her because she sent me back an even more aggressive response, one that got under my skin, even though what we were arguing over was less than $100. Yeah, lessons and opportunities reside in all we experience. For sure, Ashley. Well put. I sat down to write her a blistering reply that would be sure to put her in her place. Just then, the unbidden thought of gratitude flickered into my mind. Remember that you are cultivating gratitude, I reminded myself. What can you find to be grateful for in this situation? Nothing was evident to my eyes at the moment. So I determined that I would not reply to her until I could begin my response with the words, I am grateful to you for. The first few ideas that came to my mind had to be thrown out. I'm grateful to you for being an idiot. I'm grateful to you for showing me just how wrong a person can be. Meanwhile, I calmed down and then it struck me that there was, in fact, one thing in this vein I could validly say. I could say to her, I am grateful to you for showing me what this situation looks like from your point of view. This was true. She was telling me that what the unsatisfactory situation looked like to her, even though it was her radically different viewpoint that was so infuriating. Once I had settled on articulating my gratitude to her for sharing her perspective, I was able to see that her position actually had validity too. If I had bought a toaster at the department store, I told myself, and I took it back after a few weeks because it wasn't working for me, I'd expect a full refund. That's just how she saw the situation. Standing on my rights, we had a fight on our hands. Liberated by the practice of gratitude, I could see the situation from two perspectives, both of which had merit. I gave her back her money, and we both came away from the situation satisfied. An attitude of gratitude. You can see from this story that gratitude does not mean uttering a polite thank you when someone confers a benefit. The goal is to do the work it takes to weave thankfulness deeply into the very fabric of your being, permeating everything you do. Wow. Let me reread that. The goal is to do the work it takes to weave thankfulness deeply into the very fabric of your being, permeating everything you do. To achieve that level, said Rabbi Joachim Levowitz, you must keep talking like a fishwife endlessly about everything you receive. Although gratitude practice requires that we put our feelings into action, the essence of the soul trait is the inner attitude we maintain. We learn this from the story told by the same Rabbi Levovitz. The rabbi had a special fund from which his yeshiva students could borrow money. One year, a young man borrowed some money to travel home for Passover. On returning to the yeshiva, the student returned the money and expressed his thanks. Immediately, his teacher reproached him because there is a Jewish value that when a beneficiary expresses gratitude, he or she diminishes the good deed and undercuts the selflessness of the doer. The boy got the message. Think about that. A Jewish value. When a beneficiary expresses gratitude, he or she diminishes the good deed and undercuts the selflessness of the doer. Look at all sides of the coin. Wow. The next year, the same boy again borrowed the money from the fund to travel home. This time, though, he had learned his lesson and returned the money without a word. Where's your gratitude? Rabbi Levovitz chided him. The baffled student burst out. But Rebbe, last year I thanked you and you rebuked me. This year I didn't thank you and again you rebuked me. What am I supposed to do? His teacher explained, it is certainly forbidden for you to express any verbal thanks in this situation, but the feeling of gratitude inside you should have been so strong that it would have been hard for you to remain silent. I didn't see you experience any struggle to remain silent. This story points out that the very essence of gratitude lies in the heart and not in behavior. Whoa. Important. An inner attitude or stance of thankfulness provides us with resources that help us face whatever we encounter in our lives. It's personal. A grateful heart is a solid platform from which to reach out to take care of others as well as ourselves, because this orients us towards the resources we have, not what we lack. An attitude of optimism and joy ensues, and it is to foster that outlook that we practice gratitude throughout our day. The intention is that we see that the seeds we plant in practice will sprout, and then we will find ourselves experiencing flashes of gratitude as we go about the ordinary activities of our life. It is good to give thanks to the Lord and to sing praises to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your goodness in the morning and your faithfulness at night, from Psalms 92. And you know what? I think we're going to leave it there for today, and we'll come back. I don't think there's enough time for me to finish. What do you guys think? Should I continue or should I come back next week? Anybody? Yeah, I want to enjoy these lessons. Compassion, that's something I really need to digest. So I think maybe we'll start with that when we return with Rocky Mountain readings. All right. Aiming for Tuesday. I got to work all night the next weekend. Yeah, I'm familiar with Rabbi Shalom Arush. One of his students, I was doing a broadcast last year. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. So, yeah, I'm working nights all weekend again, and still scheduled one thing of Mark Note. Pirkei Avos this weekend will be our 100th episode. And it's a milestone for sure. And, of course, we're still on for Genesis class on Sunday. And I'm waiting to hear back today from Rabbi Ingber to see if we're still doing something fresh there, which we were doing our anyways, yeah, so I'm definitely on for probably 2 or 3 broadcasts this weekend, and I'm still working the night shift. So, yeah, I think I'll tune out for today, and we'll be back on Tuesday with Rocky Mountain readings, and we'll continue more of Everyday Holiness. And please think on gratitude this weekend, everything you've got to be thankful and grateful for, and let it transform your heart. I love how he's pulled out that it's something that is woven into the fabric of your soul, when you're one that focuses, it helps you to have the right glasses to see properly rather than not. Become a thankful person, one of gratitude, and it will definitely be helpful in your life. You can't go wrong with it. And yeah, we're going to sign up for now. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. We'll see you again on Rocky Mountain Readings. Bye for now.